to our first question, gentlemen. And the first person we'll go to is Mr. Toyin Prince-Ol of the Labour Party. Given the extended fall in oil prices, can you give us the key headlines on how your administration would manage the resulting drop in funds available to the Rivers State government? And what can you add to assure us that these steps are realistic and sufficient? Given the extended fall in oil prices, can you give us the key headlines on how your administration would manage the resulting drop in funds available to the state government, and what can you add to ensure or to assure us that these steps are realistic and sufficient?
Thank you. I think it's a very good question. It emphasizes the reason why it's important that in our choice of governor, we have individuals who are creative, who understand the need to think on their feet. Now, I think the first thing I'll say is that it's a silver lining that is accompanying this black cloud. We've been talking for a while now on the need to diversify our economy. And we've been talking more than actually doing. Now, for the first time, we're being forced to think on our feet, because naturally, a reduced oil revenue means that state governments who are reliant on huge oil budgets to fund their activities no longer have that luxury. But before we talk about the drop in oil revenue and what we will do, it's important to know that just a bit of background will tell you that this is going to be a long process. Now, from shale oil production, we've had an extra 2.5 billion barrels that have come into the market. And OPEC has refused to cut production. OPEC refused to cut production simply because Saudi Arabia refused to cut production. Now, if Saudi Arabia refuses to cut production, it's important that we realize that there is something going on behind the scenes. What is going on? A reduced oil price means that there will be pressure on countries like Iran, countries like Venezuela, countries like Russia. And the current political climate, if you understand economic or financial or foreign relations, you will understand that there is a deliberate ploy by America and the Saudi Arabians to ensure that they have a reduced oil price. That means that we should expect this for a long time to come, because they want to put pressure on Iran, they want to put pressure on Russia. So we need a government that is prepared for the long haul. So diversifying the economy is, without doubt, the only way forward. Now, what do you have to do? The first obvious thing to do that most people don't think about is that government has to be more efficient. I remember a governor saying to me once that a 23 billion naira project was a waste of money. In this day and age, a 23 billion naira project was a waste of money. How can we be saying that? Now, we have to be more efficient with our resources. So we need governments to be much more realistic, much more practical. So that's the first thing you have to do. Secondly, we need to diversify the economy into other areas. The areas that people don't talk about. Everybody talks about agriculture. Of course, agriculture is key. And without a doubt, diversifying into agriculture is something that needs to be done. It's long overdue. But we also need to think about a couple of other things, which is that we need to expand our economic base. In other words, you need to have business community alive and well and kicking. Now, you can see that this forum was organized by the business community. Why? Because in this state, the businesses have had enough. The relationship between the business and the government has broken down because the government is not listening to the business community. So my responsibility will be to make sure that I can expand the base by increasing what is important to the business community. And what is that? Multiple taxation, major issue for them. Government needs to deal with issues of multiple taxation. There is a bill right now in the House of Assembly that arrived the House of Assembly in October 2012 to harmonize tax bills, or taxes in the state. Up till now, it has not been passed. What are the other issues? Access to affordable capital. Government needs to make sure that access to affordable capital is possible for businesses. Progressive, successive businesses that do well have to be given support by the government. Insecurity. We've talked about insecurity. Businesses cannot be thriving if insecurity is a major issue. So we need to increase our revenue base. And that is how you can increase your IGR, and ultimately, that is how you can move the economy forward. It's about understanding the language of business. If government does not understand the language of business, there's nothing it can do.
We move on to our next speaker to answer the same question. Mr. Dakuko Peterside, please.
Thank you very much. Talking about the economy in an era of global reduction of oil price, I like to say that currently the government of Nigeria, and same for the government of Rivers State, is highly dependent on revenue from crude oil. That we must move away from if we must grow our economy. Budgets, like you said, depend mostly on federally allocated revenue. We will change that. But in addition to that, I want to look at two critical things. One, how are we going to fund our development programs? We have conceptualized a document called the Rivers State Development Financing Strategy. In that document, in addition to the federal allocated revenue, which will continue to dwindle likely for three key reasons. One is the shale oil revolution in the United States, and the position of Saudi Arabia in terms of the quota of production. In addition to that, we must rejig our internally generated revenue if we're going to pursue any development program at all. If we rejig our internally generated revenue, what are we going to do? Look at taxation. What are we going to do different in taxation? Streamline taxes. My brother Tony made reference to the fact that there's a bill before the State House of Assembly, tax harmonization bill. But unfortunately, I know that he doesn't understand how some of these things work. Now, the truth of the matter is that in harmonizing taxes, you require a lot of engagement with the third tier of government, local government. You are harmonizing between the state and the local government. Local government come with different and distinct laws. All of these laws need to be harmonized and synchronized with state laws so that you can come up with a piece of legislation that will stand the test of time. In addition to boosting your internal generated revenue, the other thing you need to look at, there are several international development agencies out there, African Development Bank, World Bank. You have access to all those resources if you do the right things, get your economic parameters right. In addition to that, we're going to explore public-private partnership. There are a lot of things currently being done by government that will be done better working in partnership with the private sector. Now, there are other things the private sector itself can lead. Government can't do everything. Government should only be a facilitator. Apart from that, then, the other thing is that we must change our spending pattern. We must reorder our priorities. In terms of our spending pattern, you can't ignore the place of efficiency and effectiveness in government expenditure. And to arrive at that, the due process must be examined extensively. We are perhaps one of the few states that have a public procurement law in place. We're going to look at that law again, look at its implementation in the main, and ensure that Rivers will get the value for every single kobo of government money spent. That's one side. The other aspect of it, the other strand of it, is the diversification of the economy itself, which has become a mantra. Everybody talks about diversification of the economy. Nobody tells us how they intend to diversify the economy. If you ask people, everybody will tell you, oh, the solution to dwindling oil price is diversification. Please, how do we intend to diversify the economy? We have said several in different fora. We're going to focus on 4 sectorial areas. Area number 1 is agriculture, aquaculture, and agro-allied industries. It's been said that, oh, everybody talks about agriculture. But research has proven that agriculture has the highest capacity of absorbing people into employment, and it absorbs across sectors. So those who are not skilled, semi-skilled, and skilled can find a place in agriculture. It's the only sector that has that capacity. What are we going to do in agriculture? One, we have a model, the Songhai farm. We must
Thank you very much. We'll now move to the next speaker, but please be reminded, gentlemen, that after you've all answered your questions, you'll have 2 minutes each to give your comments on what your colleagues have said. If there are things you feel you disagree with or you agree with, you'd like to implement if you become governor. We go to Mr. Nyesom Wike for his answer.
Thank you. You just asked now that at the dwindling price of oil, as a state, if you are given the mandate, what are you going to do? Knowing fully well that now that really depends on oil. First thing we have to do as a government, knowing that Rivers State is not a country, it's a state, we have to cut the cost of governance. Because when you look at the budget of most states, you find out that the cost of the current expenditure is so much higher than that of the capital expenditure. So government has as a point of duty to make sure that it cuts the cost of governance. There are so many frivolities that if you look at the budget, it's not necessary. So government has to think towards to see that certain things must be eliminated. Secondly, IGR is the key. How is IGR the key? You have to come back home and see how you can block the loopholes of internally generated revenue. Like it's happening today at the federal level, what the federal government is doing, now fall back to now see which areas are we not doing well in terms of internally generated revenue. That is key for us. And so for us, we're going to make sure that all the loopholes as it relates to internally generated revenue will be stopped and encourage people to pay their taxes. Now, when people talk about diversifying the economy, it looks as if government will go into business. Government should not go into business. Rather, what government should do is to create enabling environment that will attract private investors, that will attract businessmen to come to the state. When they come to the state and establish, that of course will raise the revenue of government. So when people talk about diversification, going into agriculture, as if you want government to go into, as a business, government at this time is not and should not venture into doing business. The business of government now, in order to attract private investors, in order to attract businessmen, is to create an enabling environment. And creating that enabling environment means that security must be provided. Security being provided is not people who are carrying guns on the road. No, that is not the security I'm talking about.